10 unusual aspects of the Civil War that defy explanation. Let's have this conversation. The Civil War often appears as a mere collection of dates and notable figures. Yet, if one delves deeper, a perplexing and profoundly human conflict emerges, one that could astonish even the likes of Dickens. Imagine if the Union had actually employed war elephants, or if Congress engaged in physical altercations over slavery, resulting in a wig being dislodged. Consider the peculiar moment when 20,000 young soldiers paused amidst chaos to engage in a snowball fight, or the notion that coffee, rather than artillery, played a pivotal role in determining the war's outcome. This is not a fanciful retelling. It is the genuine narrative of a war where dysentery influenced ceasefires, tourists treated battlefields as entertainment venues, and a prison camp transformed into a circus complete with ticket sales. Here, college students marched to their demise while quoting Euripides, and the Union Navy found itself in a bizarre situation involving a hostage Santa Claus. These anecdotes are not mere asides. They illustrate how war can distort reason, how desperation can give rise to the absurd, and how the most authentic histories can sometimes be those that seem too strange to accept. Before we proceed, kindly consider liking and subscribing to our channel to support our community. Prior to the outbreak of the Civil War, King Rama IV of Thailand, known as Mongkut, identified a peculiar shortcoming in American military resources: the absence of elephants. Recognizing this as a significant gap, he sought to address it. When sectional conflicts escalated into war, he seized the opportunity. In 1861, he sent a letter to President Abraham Lincoln, offering an unlimited supply of war elephants, asserting that they could breach Confederate defenses, transport artillery, construct fortifications, or simply roam freely to establish breeding populations. Lincoln's response was a blend of appreciation and practical consideration. He expressed his gratitude for the king's generous offer, but noted that the northern climate was unsuitable for elephants. While he declined the offer politely, he left unaddressed the logistical challenges of sustaining 10-ton animals on battlefields or the potential threat posed by Confederate sharpshooters targeting their handlers. As the war extended into 1864 and 1865, resulting in devastating losses, historians suggest that Lincoln may have reflected on Mongkut's letter with a sense of nostalgia. An elephant brigade could have effectively breached the trenches at Petersburg, while elephants equipped with tools might have expedited the reconstruction of damaged railroads. The sincere yet impractical proposal from the King of Siam stands as one of the most extraordinary hypothetical scenarios in the logistics of the Civil War. In 1858, a contentious political clash in the U.S. Capitol served as a stark indication of the impending divisions within the nation. Congress engaged in prolonged debates regarding the proposed Constitution for Kansas's statehood, a document that permitted slavery while prohibiting free black individuals from residing there, inciting outrage among Northern Republicans. Exhausted legislators deliberated into the early hours, many resorting to whiskey and wine to maintain their stamina. At 1:30 a.m., a heavily inebriated Democrat, Lawrence Kite, rose to mock Republican Galusha Grow, derisively referring to him as a black Republican pup. Grow retaliated with his own racially charged insults, and the exchange escalated into a barrage of invective until Kite abruptly lunged at Grow, plunging the chamber into turmoil. The House Speaker attempted to quell the altercation by striking the House mace, but some interpreted this as a signal to escalate the conflict. A congressman seized a heavy brass spittoon and struck a rival on the head. The situation became perilous when William Barksdale found himself ensnared in a headlock, enduring several blows to the head. Upon breaking free, he discovered that his wig had dislodged during the fray. Flushed and flustered, Barksdale retrieved it from the floor, only to inadvertently place it on backward. The sight of his crooked hairpiece elicited uproarious laughter from the entire house, effectively diffusing the tension in the room. Legislators ultimately reached a reluctant consensus after much deliberation. The confrontation highlighted how swiftly tensions could escalate into violence, yet it also demonstrated that a singular, humanizing incident, a man's poorly arranged wig, could diffuse animosity among even the fiercest adversaries. While the battles of the Civil War are often the focus of historical accounts, soldiers contended with a far more lethal enemy in their encampments: rampant disease. Approximately two-thirds of military fatalities were attributed to illness rather than combat, a consequence of deplorable living conditions where open latrines were situated upstream from drinking water and soldiers slept under lice-infested blankets. Dysentery emerged as the leading cause of death during the war, with chronic diarrhea affecting 99% of the troops each year. The affliction did not discriminate. Both high-ranking officers and common soldiers endured the agony of gastrointestinal distress amidst the chaos of battle. This dire situation led to the establishment of one of warfare's most peculiar practices: unofficial truces for latrine use, during which neither side would fire upon soldiers, relieving themselves in the midst of combat. As recounted by a Wisconsin soldier, Confederate troops would wave handkerchiefs when nature called, and the Union forces reciprocated the gesture the following morning. The term "good guts" entered military vernacular not as a metaphor for bravery, but as a literal measure of survival. Those unable to endure prolonged intestinal suffering succumbed to dehydration in fever tents, their bodies ravaged by relentless diarrhea. Field surgeons even classified stool samples akin to artillery ratings, categorizing them as mild, galloping, or cannonade diarrhea. Ironically, the germ theory of disease was developed during the war's concluding years, but it came too late for the majority. While meningeal infections claimed 110,000 lives, dysentery and typhoid fever accounted for over 300,000 deaths. In fact, even soldiers who underwent amputations had better chances of survival than those who drank from canteens contaminated with parasites. The true legacy of the conflict, it underscores the adage that an army is sustained by its provisions and can falter due to its vulnerabilities. The initial significant confrontations of the war commenced shortly thereafter on July 21, 1861. Approximately 30,000 Union soldiers advanced southward to Centerville, Virginia, gearing up for what was referred to in the North as the First Battle of Bull Run, while Confederates called it the First Manassas. The combat occurred just a few miles from Washington, D.C., where local residents perceived the conflict as a weekend entertainment. The prevailing optimism at the onset of the war led civilians to believe that the Union would easily defeat the rebels, prompting hundreds to prepare picnic baskets and travel to witness the event as if it were a sporting match. At dawn, throngs of inquisitive civilians made their way to the picturesque Virginia landscape. Elegantly dressed spectators claimed vantage points on the hills. One woman, using opera glasses, exclaimed, "How splendid!" And my, isn't this first-rate? As the cannon fire commenced. Encouraged by the presence of the crowd, some soldiers deviated from their formations to engage with the onlookers, narrating the unfolding events as if they were part of a theatrical performance. A few daring civilians ventured perilously close to the front lines, disregarding the warnings from officers. The atmosphere shifted dramatically when Confederate forces regrouped. A sudden cavalry charge surged toward the overconfident spectators who had strayed onto the battlefield. Some were taken prisoner, while others disappeared amid the turmoil. In a state of panic, civilians abandoned their champagne and parasols, fleeing in terror back to Washington through clouds of dust and gun smoke. This ill-fated picnic battle served as a sobering realization. Both factions understood that the war would be far more brutal and prolonged than anyone had anticipated. New York's Elmira Prison became the northern equivalent of Andersonville, a grim facility intended for 5,000 inmates that swelled to 10,200 Confederates by 1864 after the breakdown of prisoner exchanges. The overcrowded camp was plagued by sewage-filled ditches inundating the barracks, while winter temperatures plummeted to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. Local residents regarded the site as a grim spectacle. Entrepreneurs erected twin 40-foot observation towers along Water Street, promoting camp viewings at a cost of 15 cents for adults and 5 cents for children. Spectators ascended with opera glasses and picnic baskets, applauding as malnourished prisoners performed mock minstrel shows and firewalking acts. One diary recounts a prisoner exclaiming, "Enjoy the show, Yankees. We'll dance on your graves." Eventually, guards dismantled one of the towers, not out of sympathy, but due to prisoners creating obscene shadow puppets. The other tower remained operational as typhoid and scurvy ravaged the camp. Visitors continued to arrive, even as frail inmates collapsed during performances. A total of 2,933 individuals perished from malnutrition and frostbite, their remains stored in ice boxes until the spring thaw permitted burial. The camp's only semblance of dignity was provided by African-American sexton John W. Jones, who discreetly recorded the names and home counties of each Confederate as he buried them. His ledgers later served as crucial documents for reconciliation, even as the profits from Elmira's observation tower financed Union artillery. In 1861, the University of Mississippi became a microcosm of the Confederacy. Out of 139 students, 135 enlisted, leaving their studies to form the University Greys. The Oxford campus was transformed into a vast hospital, with lecture halls permeated by the stench of gangrene, as 4 underage students cleaned bloodied floors. This scholarly regiment marched under a banner crafted from a professor's robe, with their initial orders directing them to the First Battle of Bull Run. However, fate intervened when their train derailed near Manassas, causing a delay in their arrival. Colonel W. H. Moore, their commander, became the first casualty of the Greys' days earlier when his revolver accidentally discharged during a drunken toast, resulting in the loss of 2 toes. The students encountered combat for the first time at the Battle of Seven Pines in 1862, where 19-year-old philosophy student Thomas Walton remarked, "We charge not with rebel yells, but Virgil's verses." By the third day of Gettysburg, only 23 members of Greys remained. Assigned to Armistead's brigade during Pickett's charge, they managed to penetrate Union lines at the angle, with one soldier carrying a Euripides text in his haversack. None of them survived the subsequent retreat. A soldier from Pennsylvania later discovered their banner wrapped around a deceased color-bearer, with pages from Aeschylus's Agamemnon tucked into his shirt. The university reopened in 1865, with 93 widows attending memorial services, their lost sons symbolized by 135 empty desks in classrooms, still marked by bullet scars. By 1863, life in the South under Union naval blockades had become a waking nightmare. The Anaconda Plan severely restricted access to salt, medicine, and cloth. Coffee prices soared to $12 per pound, equivalent to a month's salary, while rats were sold as meat in Richmond markets. As Christmas drew near, parents faced agonizing decisions. Should they explain the brutality of war or preserve the magic of childhood? Some transformed the horrors of the battlefield into holiday myths. Fathers in Alabama claimed that Yankee sharpshooters had shot down Santa's reindeer mid-flight, while mothers in Georgia whispered that Union soldiers had imprisoned St. Nick at Fort Delaware. A girl from Tennessee later recalled her brother weeping, "Do they make Santa pick lice like Papa does in camp?" Kinder fabrications were attributed to logistical challenges. Virginia parents reasoned that Santa's sleigh could not evade Admiral Porter's cannons, concealing turnip dolls behind their backs. The psychological impact of the war became evident in personal diaries. One woman from Georgia recounted childhood nights spent studying smuggled Union maps, plotting Santa's route past the blockade fleet at Charleston. "I'd move toy ships, crying, 'They'll catch him,' until Mama burned the maps," she wrote. The cruelty of the situation ultimately backfired strategically. When Union forces seized Vicksburg, they distributed Santa's postponed gifts along with confiscated Confederate sugar and lemons. Letters from children inundated Lincoln, pleading, "Please inform Santa that we are good rebels." For generations, Southern families recounted these tales not as losses in war, but as initial betrayals. It was the moment when innocents learned that Yankee signified a monster. February 1864, Dalton, Georgia. The Army of Tennessee, led by Robert E. Lee, awoke to an extraordinary sight: 5 inches of snow covering their rifle pits. For boys accustomed to the red clay of Dixie, this white spectacle ignited a spontaneous rebellion against the somberness of war. Before officers could take control, 20,000 frostbitten Confederates, many barefoot and mostly under the age of 20, initiated one of history's most remarkable snowball fights. The 1st Tennessee and 3rd Georgia regiments established rival factions, constructing icy fortifications and amassing frozen projectiles. Colonel William Gordon of the 42nd Tennessee rode through the chaos on his sorrel mare. On that particular night, 17-year-old Henry Morton from the Grays reflected, "For 3 hours we recalled our boyhood." He added, "Tomorrow we shall meet our fate as men." Within a matter of weeks, half of the snowball fighters perished at Resaca, their frozen revelry preserved in letters home, later marked by tears. During the Battle of the Wilderness in May 1864, Union and Confederate forces at Saunders Field witnessed an unusual confrontation. As the Northern troops advanced, a retreating Confederate soldier sought refuge in a rain-eroded gully, only to discover a Union soldier already taking cover there. The two adversaries found themselves in a narrow ditch, barely wider than a coffin, with their muskets aimed at one another's chests. "You are my prisoner," the Confederate soldier whispered. "Not a chance," the Union soldier replied. "You've jumped into my hole." With neither side willing to fire, knowing the shot would be deafening, they struck an agreement. They would resolve their dispute through bare-knuckle boxing. As they emerged from the gully, the combatants attracted the attention of both sides of the battlefield. A sergeant from Georgia later remarked, "We forgot our rifles." This was far more entertaining than killing. For 7 minutes, the army stood in silence as the two men fought, the Confederate delivering powerful blows, while the Union soldier responded with quick jabs. When the Northerner finally fell, bloodied and breathless, the victor assisted him to his feet. "Now, come on back proper-like," the Confederate said, guiding his disoriented opponent into their shared refuge. The battle resumed with fervor until dusk, with mini balls whizzing overhead as the victor and the vanquished shared sips from a canteen. In accordance with their improvised regulations, the Union soldier formally surrendered once the gunfire ceased, although his captor lost track of him amid the tumultuous retreat. Coffee emerged as the uncelebrated sustenance for Civil War combatants, particularly among Union forces who regarded their daily brew with almost reverent dedication. Historical documentation indicates that the term coffee appears more frequently in the journals of Northern soldiers than words such as bullet, Lincoln, or even mother. The Union Army provided an astonishing annual ration of 36 pounds of beans per soldier, sufficient to prepare 10 cups of robust coffee each morning. This fervor led to innovations on the battlefield. The Sharps Rifle Company even manufactured firearms equipped with integrated coffee grinders in the stock, a feature that soldiers utilized more than the trigger during the prolonged periods of camp life. With troops engaging in combat for an average of only 14 days per year, these grinders often deteriorated more quickly than the gun barrels. Conversely, Confederate soldiers endured a lack of caffeine due to Union naval blockades. In their desperation, they resorted to roasting acorns, chicory, and even sweet potatoes until they were charred, creating a bitter coffee substitute that lacked genuine caffeine. Correspondence from that time reveals men exchanging valuable tobacco rations for pilfered Union coffee grounds. The strategic importance of this stimulant became increasingly evident. Union General Benjamin Butler was known to schedule attacks for mid-morning, coinciding with the peak energy levels of his men after their second cup. "A caffeinated regiment fights like 3 sober ones," he asserted, following the 1864 Battle of Proctor's Creek. Medical officers observed that coffee drinkers were able to march longer distances and reload their weapons more swiftly, a benefit that arguably contributed to a shorter duration of the war. This raises a question that history may overlook. What is more peculiar, the war we have just uncovered, or the fact that we have chosen to conceal it? The narratives you have just encountered, elephants roaming Virginia, snowball armies, Santa Claus in chains, are not mere oddities. The marble monuments bear cracks, evidence that wars are not waged by statues, but by individuals. These are the individuals who exchanged Virgil for cannon fire, prepared coffee as if it were gunpowder, and turned Christmas into a means of survival. This leads us to a crucial question. If we have misinterpreted this much, what else remains concealed? What other hidden narratives, fierce confrontations, or elusive figures lie within letters that have yet to be opened? Share your most imaginative Civil War scenarios, or risk allowing them to remain undiscovered. Thank you for watching. We invite you to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more captivating historical content.